Steven, what do you think the C actually stands for? HR is not gonna like that. Jared Polin, FroKnowsPhoto.com, and this is a P, lowercase p, capital R-E-V-I-E-W of the A7C. That's right, this is a compact version of the A7 III, and I have a ton of stuff to say about this camera. Now, before we get too far, I did take it out into the real world, but it is called a pREVIEW because this is a pre-production model. I could shoot RAW, but I had to shoot RAW plus JPEG because I cannot open up the RAW files and convert them to DNGs just yet inside of Lightroom or in Photoshop. Thus why it's called a pREVIEW, because the review part is I used it in the real world. I went out to the cannabis trading company in New Jersey. They are growing hemp. It's a friend of mine, and I got invited out there. Actually, they told me I saw they had this. I was like, wait, I got some cameras to test out. Why don't I bring this camera out to your hemp farm and photograph it? It was a good opportunity to take this compact version A7C out into the real world and see how it actually works. So Sony's tagline for this camera is basically small, compact, and stamina. Stamina because I don't know why, I guess because it can keep up and keep going and going and going. But now let's take a look at the camera. This is it. It is smaller, it is more compact. It is a little different than the A7 III, and I'm gonna break the A7 III out shortly to put them side by side to show you how much more compact it isn't. Yeah, exactly, isn't. We will get to that in a second. But first things first, in the hands, it does not feel great. It is not a super deep grip. And the rubber that they use on the grip this time feels super slick, like I'm going to drop it. My pinky hangs off the bottom really a far way. You're not able to get a grip for this. Now, I may rip on certain things in this system. I'm just gonna get this out of the way right now. I wanna tell you that the A7 III is one of the most, if not the most, revolutionary cameras in the history of cameras ever, ever, ever. When it came out, it did things at a price point that nothing before it could ever have done. It is still viable today, 2.5 or almost 3 years later from when it came out. It's better than a Z6. It's better than what Nikon offers, and it's older than what Nikon offers. It is one of the greatest systems that I've ever used, and you can still use it today, thus why taking a lot of the innards from the A7 III and putting them into a camera like this means that you're basically gonna get the same results as the A7 III in a more compact body. But now let's pick it up and take a walk around it. It still takes the Z battery, so that means you should be getting the same good battery life that you were getting from the other cameras. So that's something they did right when miniaturizing this camera. They put the Z battery in there. Now, usually down here at the bottom is where you put the memory card. But you're like, oh, where's the memory card, Jared? Well, over here on this side of the camera, there is now a door that clicks open, and that is where the one SD card goes. There is only one SD card in this camera. I'm sure they could have squeezed 2 in there if they really, really wanted to, but they decided not to. So that's one of the differences between the A7C and the A7 III is the fact that it only has one card slot, which of course, I'm not a fan of the fact that it only has one card slot. Around here on the front, this is the main point, that you have a full frame sensor in here. It's the 24.2 megapixel sensor that you find in the A7 III. It's like Sony was like, hey, we got all these parts sitting around. Why don't we shrink and miniaturize the camera like we do with our PlayStations? Like when they went from PlayStation 2 that was thick and big and chody to a PlayStation 2 that was really small and dinky but did the job because it did the same thing. But miniaturizing a console system is a lot different than miniaturizing a camera because a console system just sits, you know, where your TV is, and a camera, you know, you need to actually use it. This is the heart of it, a full frame sensor of the A7 III with the same E-mount, so all of your lenses will work on this camera. Now, in terms of size, that's what we're looking at. This is like an A6600 size camera, which means we have no viewfinder up top. You now have an electronic viewfinder. Steven, zoom in on this. No, you gotta zoom in further because it's so freaking small that you probably can't see it unless you go in there like 4 times, bing, 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 to get to see this dinky little viewfinder. One of the things that I absolutely despise about the A6600 lineup and any of those compact cameras is the EVF placement for one, and the size of it. For one, the placement, as Sony explains to us, that there is no way that when they shrink the camera like this, that they could put the EVF in the middle because it would get in the way of the mount. Okay, that's understandable. But this EVF is so tiny that if you wear glasses, it's going to be very difficult to get your eye up in there to see through the EVF. And me, I'm blind and I wear glasses now, but when I shoot, I don't wear glasses, and it is very difficult to see the writing and the text inside of this viewfinder because it is so freaking small. Did I get used to it when I was out shooting? I mean, I shot, and the funny thing is, the first thing I did when I went to shoot, I lifted the camera up and I went like this. I'm like, there's no viewfinder right in the middle where I'm used to it being. Instead, I'm left-eyed, so now I gotta put this whole thing here. Right-eye people can do this. It's very much like a rangefinder. I just don't like the EVF. Now we're talking about size. I'm breaking out the A7 III right here. Because look, is there much of a difference in size? The answer is no. In terms of weight, you've got 1.12 pounds in the A7C, which is 507 grams. In the A7 III, you've got 1.44 pounds, which is 652 grams. They weigh basically the same freaking thing. The only difference is they chopped the top of the A7 III off and they put a viewfinder in on the left-hand side. I don't like that. I don't like that at all, especially when you look at them side by side. They are basically the same camera. It's not like they miniaturized this to the size of the RX100 or something and put a full frame sensor in it and said, wow, that is really small. They literally took the innards of this, chopped the top off of it, made some extra tweaks, which we're still going to talk about, and then called it a new camera. Now, while we're at it, why didn't they call it the A5 or the A6? Why is it an A7C? Why do they? Because they want to call it compact or whatever the hell the C actually stands for.
It's compact.
Stephen has verified that it is compact. Now, I know this is sounding on the negative side, but let me just tell you that it's not. I'm just pointing out things I don't like about the physical nature of what they did with the camera. I am a Sony shooter. I love this camera in terms of quality and image quality that I'm getting out of it. Out at the Cannabis Trading Company, I got fantastic results because everything inside of this camera is what I love from Sony's. From the IAF, the lock-on tracking, the 10 frames a second, the 24 megapixel sensor, the fact that I can put on a 35 1.2 and put on all of the glass that I have. I love the results. I love the quality. So I absolutely love the system that I personally rely on for my everyday shooting. So understand that the negativity is just really pointing out the fact that I'm not really sure who this camera is for. And at the end of this, we will decipher that a little more. Let me jump in here because remember when I said that I shot this in RAW plus JPEG because I can't tweak the RAW files in Lightroom just yet, but I like to use my own presets in Lightroom to give myself a great starting point? Well, what do I do here because all I have are the JPEGs? Well, guess what? FroPack 1 and FroPack 2 actually work on JPEGs, which means they work in Lightroom Mobile too on your phone. So this is the JPEG straight out of camera, and I'm gonna run it through some of FroPack 2's presets to show that you can actually do this with JPEGs, starting with matte black, high contrast, and boom, golden grams, cinnamon toast crunch, Charmin. But check this out. Apollo low contrast looks incredible with one click, and then AC/DC looks pretty good, but then I'm like, it's too yellow, but it gives me a great starting point, and then I get rid of the yellow, and boom. So if you're looking to give yourself a great starting point or speed up your RAW workflow, and if you shoot JPEG for whatever reason and you want to edit those with our presets, head on over to FroKnowsPhoto.com/FroPack2. While you're over there, you can play with the sliders to see the befores and the afters, and if you decide to pick them up right now, they are currently on sale, or you could go ahead and pick up the FroPack bundle of FroPack 1 and FroPack 2 and save even more. Now, let's get back to the video. Continuing on with some differences on the outside of the camera, One thing that I noticed when I first picked up the A7C is that there is no command dial in the front, which is where I usually control my aperture. That doesn't exist right there, but on the A7 III, you have a command dial in the front and you have a command dial in the back. You have the back command dial here on the A7C, and when I went to use the back command dial by default controlled the aperture, and then the spinny dial on the back controlled the shutter speed. That's reversed and that's backwards. So I reversed that in the menu system so that the top one is shutter speed and the aperture is the one along the back. Is that a deal breaker? No, not really, but you get used to it when you shoot with, we'll say, quote unquote, real cameras. On the top of the camera, you have custom 1, custom 2 on the A7 III, and you don't have the same custom buttons here on the A7C. So to make it more compact, they got rid of a lot of those things that you have on the A7 III, but they did add a dedicated video record button right here. And another thing that's different is that this has no record limit when you're shooting your 4K up to 30 frames per second. The same video settings in this camera as you have in the A7 III. So if I haven't made it clear enough, this is in essence an A7 III. It's all of the same parts with some minor tweaks, and you now have a tiltable, rotatable, flippy-dippy screen just like this that's borrowed from the A7S III. It is a touch screen. But a thing that they didn't borrow from the A7S III is the new menu system. You put out a new camera with the same innards of an old camera. You could have updated the menu system for everybody and given them the new menu system. I don't care, because the old menu system is perfectly fine. The more you use it, the more you understand it, and the more you know where everything is. Since we're talking about a flip-out rotatable screen like this, one of Sony's marketing pushes when they talk to us about this camera is that it's for vlogging. Can we please bury that by now? Because didn't you just come out with a ZV-1 that was the greatest vlogging camera ever because it's small, it's compact, and I'm going negative again, but bear with me, it makes sense. You're not buying, I mean, how many people are gonna buy this camera to vlog with if you make it small? Because what lenses do you make that can go on the front of this camera that keep it compact and small that are good for vlogging? Because it's certainly not your 28-60 f4 to 5.6 pancake style lens that you're selling for $300 extra as a kit lens for this camera. 28 isn't wide enough for vlogging. 24 isn't wide enough for vlogging. You need like 20 millimeters for vlogging. You could put a 20 millimeter lens on this, but who's vlogging their life? Anybody? Steven, put your hand down. Nobody cares about watching your dog run around your backyard. For real, stop trying to sell it as a vlogging camera. Just sell it as a more compact version of something that you love. And that is what they actually tried to do, because they tried to tell us that the A6600 is great, that people love the small compact size, but then they want a full frame sensor in there in the same small camera. But I just call shenanigans and BS on a lot of that, because the small, people may hear that they want full frame, they may not understand why, and the why of it is so that you can utilize a full frame sensor and put good glass on the front of it. I get the compact nature of it, but this A7 III is not exactly much smaller than the A7C, so we can debunk the fact that they basically miniaturized it and made it worse to handhold and made the EVF harder to see. Quality is exactly the same, and I love the quality. So what's the A7 III have that is better than the A7C? You got a big ass grip that you can actually hold on to. It feels good in the hands. I mean, not as good as the A7R4, and the future A7 IV, we think, will have the same type of grip as this. You got 2 card slots in the A7 III, where you only have 1 card slot in the A7C. You have a joystick on the back of it, which makes it easier to move your focusing points. Because when I was shooting at the Cannabis Trading Company, I'm trying to move my finger around the touch screen, and I literally really needed to press on the screen in order to get it to move. The Canon R5 and the Canon R6 are just so much more sensitive when it comes to more accurately moving your focusing points. That was one of the hardest things that I had to do in the camera, was move the focusing points when I needed to tell the system where I needed it to go. The IAF and the lock-on tracking, Sony says that the IAF is kind of borrowed from the system in the A7R4. Did I notice much of a difference? no, it still felt a little laggy to me. Now, not nearly as laggy as a Nikon because those are super laggy. It just felt that maybe the processor in the camera wasn't able to keep up with the new system that they have. But was it a deterrent? Did it make me miss shots? And the answer is no. You get used to it and you just keep shooting. And that's another thing is people trading up or getting this camera will never know what is different in it from any of the other ones. They just know what this camera offers them. Now, I know that I've had a lot to say about this already, but I just had to get some of these things off of my chest. But now let's talk about using it in the real world situation. Now, like I said earlier, I shot RAW plus JPEG, but the images that you're seeing edited on the screen were all from JPEGs that I tweaked. And in the future, I will go back and re-edit the RAW files when I can unlock them so that I can make some prints for these people and send them a nice gift for their wall. Don't tell them that I'm doing that, okay? But anyway, the scene. It's a farm. It's like 30-some acres. And I was out there and they have a bunch of different greenhouses where they're growing the hemp. They're gonna process it, they're gonna sell it, they're gonna do what they do, and it is all being done legally. And I thought it was a really cool place to photograph because I had a lot of different angles that I could capture. I took the 35-1.2. I took the 135 1.8. I took the brand new 12 to 24 2.8, and I took a 24 to 70 2.8, which I actually never shot with. Right off the bat here, I just started with the 35 1.2 at 1.2, photographing one of the plants. I just wanted to establish that scene. I mean, obviously wide angle establishes it more, and clearly I have wide angles, which we'll see, and I could always change the order. But this was just, okay, let me get a feel for shooting, let me get a feel for the focusing, let me get a feel for the camera. So moving on, they were laying out these nets on top, all the way down the entire greenhouse, I guess to keep them growing straight up and to give them some support. So I got down low, I had on the 35 1.2 again. The IAF I rely on. I love shooting with the Sonys more than I love shooting with any other system. If I had to put it in order, I'm gonna put the Sony up top, I'm gonna put Canon just under Sony. Like, they are really close to Sony because I can shoot with those as well. And then picture this, they're up here, and you know where Nikon is? Nikon, how you doing down there? You good? And this is where you guys leave comments that all I do is hate on Nikon. And it's well deserved that I hate on Nikon, by the way. Quality, image quality wise, love Nikon's files more than Sony, more than Canon, but everything else about the systems right now, they need to catch up. Please catch up. All right, super sharp images. Love this shot because you have their dog on the right-hand side, you have his wife in the background. You can see that this roping is basically going between my legs, so I like that picture. Let me show you something. This is a 35 1.2 from Sigma. This is my favorite lens on the Sony system. But when you put this lens on the a7C and on the a7 III, it's gonna be exactly the same. It's a heavy lens. So one of the things about making something more compact is great. You just made it more compact. Are you gonna go around and shoot with a 28 to 60 millimeter pancake lens and be happy with an f4 to 5.6? Or do you wanna put quality glass on it? Anytime you start putting quality glass, and yes, I'm gonna say that the 28 to 60, even though we don't have it and we haven't used it, it's a pancake lens. It's not gonna be very good. It's not. You can get the job done if you need to, but you're not gonna get this 1.2. You're not gonna get this separation from the background and the sharpness that you get out of a lens that is obviously a hell of a lot more expensive than $300. That's not the point. The point is that you can market smaller and lighter all you want. But as soon as a professional decides that they want to put good glass on it, the size of the camera doesn't matter. I thought that the race to go smaller was over like 3, 4, 5 years ago when people realized, oh shit, I want to put quality glass on it. I'm tired of getting crappy results because my lenses suck. So keep that in mind, that most amateurs are going to think that that $300 lens is going to be perfect for them. They're going to put it on here in full auto. They're going to start shooting and they're going to be like, my pictures suck, this camera sucks. When in fact, we know that the camera doesn't suck. It's one of the best systems in the world ever. Okay, rant over. Moving on. Low angle, same thing. Oh, this is with the 12 to 24 2.8. Wow, do I love having 12 to 24 2.8. My shutter speed for this is 1/1000th of a second at f2.8, 400 ISO. And now's a good time to tell you that You know, shooting inside of these greenhouses is great because it softens any of the light. It was also raining out, so there was a lot of clouds, and it wasn't super bright, which is kind of a good thing, being that I like to shoot wide open, because this camera tops out at 1/4000th of a second, not 1/8000th of a second, like the a7 III. So even zooming in on these JPEGs, you can notice how super sharp these images are. The IAF finds where it needs to find. Like I said, on occasion though, trying to move the focusing point using the touchscreen was a little more difficult than if I had an actual joystick. Then trying to change the ISO, I usually set the C1 button to ISO on any of my Sony cameras because it's just up top. But they do have a button in the back that you do get used to finding. It's just with my thumb on the right, up, up, down, down, left, right, BA selected. On the D-pad, that can change the ISO quickly, so you just get used to the quirks, you get used to where things are. So when I started shooting with this, yeah, the EVF was small and is kind of a pain in the ass to shoot with. You kind of get used to it. I would prefer something larger, but anyway, I'm really happy with the results that I got. Just 12 to 24, having that range. Shooting like this, what I love about this photo is that he's spreading out the rope around the plants, and that I was able to get a shot where his head is framed between the ropes. So from a photo standpoint, I like the photo like that. You also won't see a lot of black and whites here, because what's the point of black and white when you have these awesome green plants that really add some nice color and dimension? Black and white kind of makes it look just like weeds. I mean, it is weeds, but you kind of want to see the green. Let me cut in here real quick to remind you that I have 4 different educational video guides. Head on over to FroKnowsPhoto.com/guides to check out the FroKnowsPhoto Guide to Getting Out of Auto, the FroKnowsPhoto Guide to Flash Photography, the Guide to Shooting Video, and the Guide to Editing Video. You can get free previews of each of those guides over on the website. Now, let's get back to the video. Moving on. Ooh, wow. What's this with? The 12 to 24 at 24 millimeters. What a cool shot of the dewdrops on the plants. You know, if you're wondering why don't we have video shot with this camera, because it's the same as the a7 III, there's really no reason to go ahead and shoot that, other than it has the updated tracking and IAF, so that is a bonus. I mean, this could be a good video camera as a C camera, it could be a good B camera, and the fact that it doesn't have a time limit, you know, maybe you could just set it up somewhere and hit record. That's pretty good. Another thing to add to the video features that this camera has that the a7 III doesn't have is that you can change the focusing speed very similarly to what's in the a7S III. So if you want it to rack slower or rack faster, you can do that in the a7C. For that type of purpose, it could certainly work. But the colors out of the camera, you know what to expect because, again, it's an a7 III. The lock-on to the eyeball is fantastic. This is shot at 1.8 with the 135. It's a 135 1.8. I love that you have out of focus plants in the foreground that draw us into her blue eyes, and the red hair makes everything pop. And you also know the scene where she's at. What I was going for here with the 135 is I stepped all the way back so that I could get multiple people in the frame. She's in the middle of the plants. The guys in the back are in the middle of the plants. So, you know, using the camera, as a photographer, you should be able to pick up any camera other than Nikon at this point and get great results. Because the fact is, I actually took a Z5 out to this, and that's for another video altogether, and Steven doesn't want me going off on a tangent. But I tried to use the Z5. Other than the viewfinder being so much larger than in this camera, the IAF just failed. And we actually have EVF footage. It just couldn't. The red boxes are bouncing all over the place. Couldn't even find the person's face. Oh, and that was using their kit lens, 24 to 50 kit lens or whatever that is. That just shows you that those pancake lenses, you can get the job done, but only on the right system. So the 28 to 60 on this Sony system, I'm sure everything in terms of focus will be really good. I'm just not sold on a crappy $300 lens like that. Moving on, back to the 35-1.2. I love that I can shoot that at 1.2 and it nails the eye, because when you zoom in super close to this image, you're like, wow, that is gorgeous and looks really good. So I could just keep going through some of these, just finding some nice portraits or environmental portraits of the subjects that are out there. Shooting vertical is something I need to mention, because holding this camera up like this, do you shoot vertical like this when you're over, or do you shoot vertical like this when you're under? To me, this is difficult. This is also difficult. But with the a7 III, you can get a vertical grip for it, a battery grip with buttons. You can't do that with the a7C, so just understand that it's going to be a little more awkward when you try to shoot vertically. This is why I love 1.2, but this again is explaining why when you have a small camera, that just because it's small doesn't mean once you put big glass on it that it stays small, because good glass is good glass. It's always gonna be big for the most part, and I get it. Some people are like, I want a travel camera. But you can't sell me on the fact that this is going to take up much less room than this, because it's not, all right? So if you already have an a7 III, of course you're not buying an a7C. This is not meant for you. This is meant for the people that hear about full frame, maybe get sold on the fact that it's for vlogging, which we know it's not. I mean, it could be, and then they move up to something like this. Just love the isolation of the subject here. This is why I shoot at 1.2. Why I shoot at 1.2 is because I can rely on the system, because I love that Sony system and their IAF. This was a shot I was going for with her down in the weeds. She was pruning down a little lower. I think they call it mainlining or whatever they were calling it. And because of the contrast of the green, the orange of her hair, the red of the hair, and the blue of the eyes, that is the type of shot that I was going for. If she would have been a little more cooperative and not as shy on camera, I would have done a top-down shot a little more tight to vertical that would have, or horizontal, that would have just focused on those eyes and filled the frame a little more, but I just wasn't able to get that done. Another cool shot, another one, DJ Khaled, 35-1.2. 35-1.2 on this bad boy in the larger greenhouse as they're working. And then I wanted to get the group shot of them working. So that's a group shot of them working, followed by the group shot that will look beautiful in their house, in the farmhouse, because this is their business. This is the first year they're doing it, so this helps tell that story. The wides, the details, the mediums, the telephotos, and that's what I'm trying to tell. Tell the best story. So at the end of the day, the results are fantastic, because the a7 III innards are fantastic. The a7C is going to give you fantastic results if you know what you're doing and you can put the right glass on there and get, just like any other camera, if you know what you're doing, you put the right glass on there, you're gonna get great results. Price point, $1,800 for the a7C. Thankfully, it's less expensive than the a7 III, which is $1,998 currently, which is still a great price point, but I do expect that the a7 III will drop by $300-ish at least when the a7 IV gets announced, but they should continue to sell it. The dilemma here is, who's it for? And is it worth it over an a7 III? For me, no, it's not worth it over an a7 III. I was thinking that, well, maybe as like a third backup in the bag, because it's so small, I could put it in my bag. But the truth is, it's not that small. You can just see the difference. It's really not much of a difference. They miniaturized a lot of stuff. They took out a bunch of stuff, as we said. But if you have an a7 III, you keep the a7 III. There's no reason to get it. If you're somebody who wants to get into the full frame game, I still don't see buying an a7C. I just find it hard to justify paying $1,800 for this versus $2,000 right now. If I'm recommending a camera for someone, unless this is a video-centric thing and you need the red button up top and you need the flip-out rotating screen, this is gonna be a nice camera, but $2,000 or $1,800 is a lot of money for what this is. If they came in at a price point and they really wanted to kneecap the competition, or kind of kneecap themselves, they could have put it down at $1,500. I mean, maybe you will see a rebate during the holidays to drop it down even further. And then at that point, it becomes a very interesting proposition, because if there's a $500 difference or a $600 difference, then you're starting to see, like, you know what, get in the ecosystem, it's a start, it's full frame, it's $500 less. It's a starting point, and then when you can upgrade to like an A7R4 in the future, then you know, you'll have this as a nice backup. Hey, let me jump in here real quick and say, do you want to show the world that you shoot RAW? That's right, the new store.FroKnowsPhoto.com is up and running. It has this shirt, it has that awesome Space Edition shirt that's behind me as well, and a bunch of other accessories, hats, stickers, hair picks, and good stuff. So go to store.FroKnowsPhoto.com right now to pick up some swag. So what do you think? I think some of you are saying, Jared, why aren't you doing the important tests like the sniff test and the wind tunnel test? Well, I am. Here I go. I'm gonna huff, I'm gonna puff. Yeah, A7C loses. It loses the wind tunnel test because it doesn't have this beautiful ergonomic windscreeny thing that we call an EVF up top. I know I just blew on the wrong side, but whatever, you get the point. Better ergonomics on this one for the wind tunnel test. Now, sniff test is very important. Oh, I just got hungry. I think I just got the munchies because it smells like weeds. You know, green plants, because I was at a farm that grows a subset of that, and it's called hemp. If you like the smell of that, then maybe this camera is for you. So, long-winded, had a lot to say about this. Of course, Sony's still making fantastic things. I'm just at a loss for the size of this, and great. You could shrink it, you shrunk it, so be it. Comments, questions, concerns, leave them down below. Give this some likes, give this some love. Thank you very much for watching. Jared Polin, FroKnowsPhoto.com. See ya.